Good morning, everybody. My name is Larry Jacobs. This is Pre-K-12 Education Talk Radio. It's a couple of days before Halloween. It's October 29th, 2024. And today we're going to be talking about failure, productive failure, which is the name of a book written by a true expert in learning, deep learning. And his name is Dr. Manu Kapur. I think he might be in Singapore today. I heard that from someone, okay? And I am very interested in failure, okay? And we all know that failure leads to succeeding, all right? And I'm going to bring Dr. Kapur on right now. He's been doing tech talks, et cetera, et cetera. Manu, are you there?
Yes, Larry, I am.
Hi, Manu.
Can you hear
Larry
me?
Jacob. I can hear you fine. Can you hear me?
Yes, very fine. Thank you.
Great. And are you in Singapore today?
Actually, I'm currently in Switzerland.
I can't keep up with you, Manu. I can't keep up with you, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
All right.
I travel a lot,
yes. Somebody told me you were going to be calling in from Switzerland, from Singapore. But I guess you only go to places that begin with an S. So I'll take Switzerland. That's just fine. Equally right. Beautiful. I have to ask you something. We're going to talk about failure, but I happen to know, and I'm very, very close friends with another expert in failure, and he's from Columbia University too, and he knows you. Okay, do you know Stu Firestein?
Oh. Yes, you know I do. I do.
Okay.
Yeah,
Stuart, he is my oldest friend. We grew up together in Philadelphia,
what a small world.
Doors apart.
What a small world, yes.
It is. And when I saw your book was Productive Failure, okay, he taught a course in failure at Columbia, still teaching it probably. I was just in touch with him, but I don't know if he's teaching the course. And he's a neuroscientist, okay? And the minute I saw yours, I called him and said, you know Manu Kapur? He goes, yes, I do. Why are you asking? And I told him you're going to be on the show, so I'm going to be sending this to him when we are done, okay?
Fantastic.
Yeah, and he said, by the way, he sends a big hello to you. Okay, so I'm so glad we're doing this.
Oh, that's very nice. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Please send my regards as well.
I promise you I will. Okay, I promise you I will. And first of all, let me ask the most obvious question. How's the weather in Switzerland today?
Oh, it's a beautiful fall day, 12 degrees, sunny. Yeah. It's really nice out. Yeah,
and where are you? You're in Zurich?
Complain.
Yeah, you're in Zurich?
I'm in Zurich right now, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Beautiful. I've been there. It's an absolutely beautiful place, okay, and it's terrific. Talk to me, okay, and I want you to explain this to people because it is hard for people to understand this. I know this. Failure. Nothing good happens without failure, okay? We're always telling people succeed, but first you got to fail. And your thoughts, okay, is that you have to be taught to fail. And this is and this makes a difference in learning. And I want you to just, as simply as possible, okay, and we're talking to a lot of educators, okay, talk about your theory here, okay, how failure leads to succeeding. Manu, you're on. Go ahead.
Right. So thanks, Larry. Yeah, you're right. Everybody, we all say we can learn from failure or that we must embrace failure. Productive failure is not just about, learning from failure when it happens, because it's bound to happen, right? So productive failure takes the conversation to the next level and says, if we all can learn from failure, if failure can be a good teacher, we shouldn't be waiting for it to happen. We should be actively designing for it. And when you ask, so when you ask that question, now that's a more provocative question because that puts the burden on us to say, how do we design for failure when you're trying to learn something new, right? And that's the science of productive failure that I've been carrying out for the last 20 years. It's about designing for failure in problem-solving tasks early on when you first come to understand, when you're first trying to learn something new. And these tasks are designed in a way that you would be able to, generate ideas and intuitions and heuristics and strategies, but you will not be able to solve them completely. That means you would fail. But the expectation here is...
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the expectation is precisely that you would not be able to. So we're very explicit with people who are going through productive failure. You will be given a challenging task. It is designed in a way that you can do some things with it, but you won't be able to solve it fully. But hey, the expectation is that you would not be able to. So don't worry about it. Just give it a shot. And once you've done that, then an expert or a teacher or a mentor could come in and support your learning and teach you, whatever it is that you're trying to learn. And it's this combination of an initial failure-driven, problem solving or exploration, followed by an expert giving you information or telling you or explaining to you the correct concepts and ideas. It's this combination that makes failure productive. And the idea here then is, we don't want people fail in exams in high-stakes situations. But if you learn using productive failure early on, then you then you learn the matter deeply, so that when failure matters in high stakes, you don't fail. That's the idea.
But one of the challenges, okay, and this is something that I believe is wrong, is that when teachers, and this includes college professors, when they grade someone, okay, they deduct failure from the grade. In other words, they're saying you failed. Okay, so now you got a 1 and you really need a 10. And I'm going to count that 1 as a failure. Okay, and that goes against you. But in reality, the failure is a huge step towards learning. It is not a failure that should be held against you. All right, it's just a proper step in the learning. Okay, and how do we unteach that everybody said, well, you're a failure, No, that's the way we learn, okay? But we count against someone. We don't, and I'll say it this way. This is what it makes me crazy that educators are not taught enough about neuroscience, okay, and how we learn, okay? So we hold failure against the student. Talk to me about that. How do we overcome that? That's a bias. It's a built-in bias that we've had over the years in education, and we've probably ruined a lot of people, okay, who would have succeeded in a lot of the areas, okay, had we known that failure is a good thing, not a bad thing. And you know what I mean when I say this has to be put into a perspective. Talk about that. Why are we doing this wrong? How do we get into this mess?
That I do not know why we're doing wrong, but you're absolutely right in the sense that, we learn through failure. If you look at, and it's all inbuilt into us, actually. That's the beauty of it. I mean, when we are children, when we are young, how do we learn? We learn through productive failure. You try things, you explore things. You don't get it at the first instance. You don't get it at the second instance, but you keep trying. That's how children learn how to walk, how to play, how to make meaning, how they learn a language. It's all through these basic failure mechanisms, from my perspective. What happens, unfortunately, after the early years, somehow we get socialized and enculturated into thinking that the failure is a bad thing. Actually, it's not. Anytime you're trying to learn something new, by definition, you don't know that thing. So if you try to do something, you would not be able to do it completely right. And and the way I try to change mindset, your question was about the mindset, is that you have to enter the failure zone to learn new things. If you can already do things successfully, you're not learning new things. You're just doing what you know successfully. But if you want to learn how to do new things, then you have to enter the failure zone by definition. It's in that zone that learning and growth happens. So the logic is very simple that way.
It really is. And you had a section in your book, and I've been reading it, that one of the hardest challenges I'm going to use it this way, to a doctoral student is trying to figure out the question that you need to ask. Okay, usually finding the answer is easier than figuring out the question. Okay, and I want to go back to how you figured this out. Okay, what made you an expert in failure? What was it? Okay, when you looked at everything that said, we have to really look at this. We have to change things here. What was it? How did you get onto this subject?
That was Yeah, I mean, it was just trying to solve, the problem of initial learning. Like, what does the process of how we come to understand something new looks like? And the dominant paradigm 20 years ago when I was a doctoral student, and perhaps to this day, was, well, if you're trying to learn something new, just tell it to the person. Right? You don't know something, let me tell you exactly what it is. And, when you review the literature, as I was doing back then, there are several problems with this paradigm, right? I mean, the understanding that develops through this method is, really shallow, and people are not able to deeply understand what they're trying to learn. So you can tell somebody something, and you can tell it really nicely and really engaging, in a very engaging manner, but still, people don't get what you're trying to say. So there's a robust research around that. So I started to ask myself, okay, if telling you the correct thing simply doesn't work, then what might? And I just, in a moment of epiphany, I just flipped the entire question and said, what if we don't start with success at all? What if the starting point of learning is failure itself, right? In other words, we assume that making learning easy eases learning, when in fact, I started to question that assumption, that maybe the idea is not to make learning easy, but to make it slightly difficult, slightly challenging. Well, how challenging? Well, that's where the scientific trick is. Well, challenging to the point that we fail. And if I could show, say, as a scientist, like even the extreme case where I can make you fail initially and then help you learn, that's a strong proof of concept. And that's how it started. I said, I need to design an experiment where I give students challenging tasks, which I designed for them to fail, and then show that even if they fail at solving these tasks, they're still learning, provided I can teach them the correct thing later. And that's the experiment I did, and the rest is history.
And the rest is history, as they say. So how can educators design a failure experience? Okay? And believe me, I know when you say all these things, okay, and I absolutely agree with you, I bet there's a lot of heads going up and down going, yes, he's accurate. I understand this. This is great. Now the next question is, how the heck do I do it? Okay? How do I do it? Because it's the opposite of everything that I've been taught about education, basically. So how does an educator design do they tell this, let me ask it a different way, do they tell the student, as we're learning together, we're going to start failing, I've designed this for you to fail. Do they tell the student that, or does the student just intrinsically understand that and know it's going to go to a better place, or does the student feel like a failure? It's a lot of layers to this onion, if I may. Okay? Work in a classroom. Manu. Yeah.
So when we try to design for productive failure, first thing that we have with the students is a conversation around the kind of norms and expectations that we have. So we tell students, look, you're used to learning in a particular way. We are designing learning using productive failure, which means we will engage you, we'll design problem-solving activities for you, where you would be able to invent ideas and generate new things, but you won't be able to solve the problem correctly. And don't worry about it. That's the expectation. We also tell them that we are doing this because after this, when you learn how to solve the problem correctly, you will actually learn a lot more. So we are very explicit about communicating what it is that we're trying to do, what is expected, that failure is a norm, and how we're going to use that for their learning later. And, both students and teachers get this. They can understand it, right? But it's important to be very explicit about this new sort of, let's say, a didactic contract, because you've got to set the expectations very, very clearly, which otherwise, it goes haywire. Once you've done that, then there are design principles. Sorry.
No, you go, please.
Yeah, so once you've done that, then there are design principles. Like in my book, in the last 2 chapters of my book, I talk about the principles that we use to design the tasks. This is not about throwing any hard problem or a challenge at the student. These challenges or these problems have particular features, right? And I talk about how you design those features into these initial problem-solving tasks. But it has to be carried out with the right set of expectations that you explicitly talk about.
And again, you are a professor of education, okay? Where are and I love this whole thing, and I love what Stu wrote about it. Took it in terms of science and failure. You know, that failure in science leads to be succeeding in science is my point. Okay, but you know, as you talk to educators, and you are a professor of education, okay, what are you hearing back from them? I know, and again, everybody would agree with you. Can they do it in the school? Where is it? Let me ask it a more simple way. Where is it working? Is it work? And somebody said you were going to be in Singapore. Singapore is known for great education. Okay, wonderful education, good scores, et cetera, et cetera. Are they doing it there? Where are they doing this, and how's it working? Because I always say that education schools are a little bit behind the curve. Okay, they have to be pushed. Okay, and everybody wants to know what's working before they try it, and I believe it does work. Okay, but how do you convince them? Where's it working?
Yeah, so look, we've done work with the schools. I mean, a bulk of my research program is actually working with schools to implement this into the curricula, to train the teachers, and so on. Yeah. So yeah, definitely in Singapore, Singapore is using productive failure in its classrooms. We did massive projects with them, and they're very supportive of that. Independently of my research, other researchers have tried to replicate my work, and much of this work is happening in different continents around the world in different schools. So schools are using it. The evidence behind it is very robust, right? And it's not just me talking about it. In fact, if you look at all the productive failure studies, only about 15% of the work is from me. The rest of the evidence is actually coming from independent.
You wrote the book. You get all the credit.
Yeah, I wrote the book.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I give you all the credit.
This is good for science, right? Yeah, this is good for science. I mean, I created the idea. I created the model. I did the scientific basis of this model. But it's good in science that people try to replicate and extend your work, right? So this is good science. Otherwise, it's just all my work. It's good in science. Stu would tell you that this is really good for science. That independent replications take place, right? And so the evidence is really robust. So it's not for a lack of evidence that is standing in between. It's really mindsets, right? It's awareness, building awareness, and also building mindsets that we can carry out productive failure, or at least try productive failure.
What questions? And I know you've had hundreds of questions. What questions came from educators as you were talking about this? What was the top thing that they asked you? Not me, them. They're in the classrooms. Yeah. And by the way, some of these teachers are elementary school teachers. Others are high school teachers. Others are college teachers. It's all different ways of learning. What were they saying at different levels? However you want to answer that.
Yeah, a couple of questions that always come out. One is how to design. You already asked me that question, so that's a fairly straightforward question. Other questions are more logistical, like constraint-based. So, does it take more time to do this? I don't have enough time. We are all time-pressed. So time is a big question that often comes out. Another question that often comes out is it good for all kinds of learners? Like, is it for higher achieving students, or is it also for low progress learners, and so on and so forth? So abilities of the students or of the learner comes into play. They ask if it does, right? And so I think these are the two kind of the biggest questions that people ask: time and who's it for?
Yeah, and who is it for? Is it for everybody? I have a feeling it is, but I'm curious.
Yeah. No, see, look, the cognitive architecture works the same way, right? And so really it is applicable to anybody. It helps both low progress or low achieving students and high achieving students as well. And we've actually shown experimental evidence that it closes the gap if you use productive failure. So
it's wonderful.
That's really powerful.
Well, we have to use it because, as you said, It's built into the human system. Okay?
Yeah.
You said it's just neuroscience, and I keep saying this. Okay? Teacher, actually, I want to ask you this, Manu. Do educators, and you work all over the world. You're in Switzerland, you're in Singapore, you're in other countries. Okay? Here in the United States, we do not train, in my opinion, we do not train teachers enough about how people learn. We do not teach them neuroscience. Okay, we teach them how to teach, but we don't teach how people learn. That's neuroscience. Okay, do they do that in other countries when they're preparing teachers? Are they doing what you and Stuart do, to learn to using neuroscience to get the job done? How's it work in education schools?
So,
go ahead.
I think increasingly so. Historically, how people learn. Yeah, one aspect of that how people learn is the neuroscientific aspects, right? But it is not the only thing. You also have the cognitive aspects, the social aspects of learning, and so on. So I think increasingly, historically, schools have focused more on the psychological or cognitive aspects of learning, and not as much on the brain behavior and neural aspects of learning, or even physiological basis of learning. But partly because a lot of this science is new, right? So I do not know what the status of how teachers are trained in the States, but I think in places like Singapore and in Switzerland and other places, there is a change that's happening, right? Slowly but surely, the people are paying more and more attention to, what does the science of learning have to say, and what can we learn? But still, I think we're still in early days of this change happening at the teacher education level.
We've got to take care of this all around. And I just have one last question, okay? Compared to traditional teaching methods, okay, is it more difficult or less difficult or about the same to teach with productive failure in mind?
It is more difficult because you're working with, novices or students' knowledge and ideas. It is easy to explain to somebody the correct knowledge that you have. It is quite another to work with, somebody else's intuitions that don't work, somebody else's misconceptions that don't work, somebody else's failed, strategies that don't work, and then try to use all of that to then teach them the correct thing. So there's a greater burden on the teacher when they want to teach using productive failure, because they're not just sharing what they know, they're working with what the learner brings to the table and then connecting that with what they know. So it's a difficult job, but, as productive suggests, if you really want your learners, your students to learn deeply and, you want them to be able to transfer to novel context, then you need to take on this burden.
Where do you think it's more important? Is it more important in elementary to get it started this way, or is it more important to do it when students are older and thinking more about what they want to do with their lives in high school or even middle school? Where do you think productive failure fits in best? It might be the whole spectrum.
On the one hand, you can try it. Yeah. On the one hand, you can try it anytime, but if you're thinking systematically for long-term effects, the earlier you start, the better it is, because then you don't have to, you can just get socialized and enculturated in the right mindset that, I'm going to learn through the challenges, I'm going to learn through struggling and failing in a safe way, because that will lead to deep learning. If that's the mindset that you build over the years, then it just is more powerful in the long run.
But we have to make some changes, and teachers have to do it. They have to take the time to try this, do it. If they fail at the beginning, that's the whole point. They're going to succeed later. Manu, this is wonderful.
Yeah.
The book is so good, okay? It's so interesting. Productive Failure. I have it linked here. Okay, it's productivefailure.com. You can go there. Dr. Manu Kapur, my guest, okay, wrote it. He's the expert behind the research. Okay, and he's a friend of mine. Manu, thank you for being with us today. Thank you. Thank you for all the work you did.
Thank you, Larry. It was a pleasure.
My pleasure indeed, sir, and have a great time in Zurich. What a lovely city. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day ahead. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye. Well, how interesting, ladies and gentlemen, how interesting indeed. Hope you take the time to check out the book. Again, it's linked here, Productive Failure. My good buddy, oldest friend, Stu Firestein, wrote a huge book, a small book, but a huge, deep book on the failure. Of course, he's been teaching at Columbia for years, and probably the most popular course on campus. All right? Failing matters, okay? It leads to success. And on that note, I'm going to leave you today. We're going to archive over at ace-ed.org. I'm Larry Jacobs. Thanks for listening, and have a wonderful, as Manu said, a wonderful day.